Alrighty, well, there are a decent amount of people, so I think we will get started. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Annabelle, and I'm one of this year's UW Combined Fund Drive campaign assistants. Here at the UWCFD, we're really excited to continue our Lunch and Learn program, even in our remote hybrid, who knows what's going on world. We still want to create a space where amazing organizations can come and continue sharing their stories with all of our UW people. So we're going to be doing questions at the end today. So if you feel like you might forget your question, just pop it in the chat and we can revisit it at the end. And then today, our Lunch and Learn will be focusing on environmental organizations. We are very lucky to live in a city that is so conscious for conservation and sustainability. When I moved here from Chicago, I was so shocked to see how much widespread compost there was in this city. We were always known as the neighbors with weird food scraps in our backyard back home. So with that being said, though, there's still a lot to be done in our environment. And so we're very lucky to have 4 wonderful organizations here today that we get to hear how they're bettering our environment. So our first speaker is going to be Alex, the Associate Philanthropy Director at Forterra. So take it away. And you should have screen sharing capability.
Thanks, Annabelle. I believe I do. We'll give it a shot here. But again, my name's Alex from Forterra. I'm the Associate Director for Philanthropy Individual Giving. I've been with Forterra almost 10 months. So I'm pretty new, but I'm excited to kind of go over just a pretty high level view of what Forterra does and talk about some of the programs and initiatives that we're currently working on, maybe a little bit of history about what happens, what has happened with Forterra. So I will go ahead and share my screen and we'll dive in here. And I definitely want to be respectful and conscientious of time. So we'll try to get through this here. All right. Are you all seeing the slideshow?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. I have 3 screens and it does what it wants sometimes. So I just want to make sure I'm not like projecting, YouTube videos or something. So just to start off with, let me get my notes up here. Sorry. I did want to initially acknowledge that we are participating with Earthshare, who coordinated us to be here today. So I wanted to thank them and acknowledge them for having us here today, which Earthshare is an organization that includes a lot of states, the state of Washington's environmental organizations, and we all take part in the combined fund drive together. So if you're curious to know more about the organizations that participate with Earthshare, you can definitely jump on their website. But in that vein, to give you kind of a mission overview of Forterra, we look to drive land-based solutions in Washington to support healthy ecosystems and environment and resilient communities for all. And to that end, we've been operating for a little more than 30 years with community support and helped to secure more than 250,000 acres of conservation of land since 1989. Primarily the things that we all love about the Northwest depend on land, with local food, farmers markets, parks and green spaces, neighborhood communities and gardens, affordable housing, trails, wilderness. It's all interconnected into the land. And so that's sort of the foundation, for lack of a better way to put it, of what we do at Forterra. We drive land-based solutions in all different areas. Where we work. So I think it's important to first acknowledge where we work. And we do gather and live on the plains and plateaus and mountains and coastal lands that have been home to indigenous peoples since time immemorial. And we respect the indigenous and tribal treaty rights and honor the culture today. And to that end, we do work across Washington in more than 100 counties, cities and towns and rural communities. This map highlights very kind of scattered across the state where we work, and you can see color coded kind of the type of work we do in these areas, whether it's conservation, partnership in green cities, community programs, or riparian restoration. Those are some key areas of our work and where we're doing that work. We do a lot of work, obviously, in Snohomish, King, and Pierce County, but as you can see, we have projects all across the state. and diving into one of the key areas of focus for our mission is resilient communities. We were touching upon that a little bit pre-meeting around the Wattajir work and also the Hilltop work, which is one of the examples that I'll kind of focus in on today, just to give you an idea of what this resilient community work means. But along community, we look for ways to involve community partnerships and connections that we have to help grow equity within the existing footprint. And with our decades of experience around development, land conservation, real estate, we look for innovative ways to provide housing and jobs and other opportunities to build wealth and support community well-being and equity. We currently have over 100 community collaborations. We have about 100,000, a little over 100,000 volunteer hours within the communities that we work just over last year. And Hilltop Tacoma is a key area that we are focused in on right now. The Hilltop Tacoma area, just to give you context, here's a map of Tacoma, and you can see the Hilltop area right here. And we have looked to help in this community in this specific parcel of land on this block here, which the Hilltop neighborhood is predominantly been known as the home to the Black and African American community for generations. The neighborhood has been a target of redlining over the history, and that redlining has led to serious long-term impacts on that neighborhood and its residents. And this once underinvested neighborhood is now experiencing a lot of rapid redevelopment, which often is isolated from the community itself in a form of gentrification. So along with sound transit's light rail expansion coming, these changes are going to accelerate. Longtime residents and business owners want to remain as part of Hilltop and its community and its culture, but increasingly are feeling the pressure of rising property taxes and rental costs. So to that end, Forterra has become involved by leveraging decades of work that we've done in Tacoma. We've had, we've had leaders of the Hilltop community reach out to us in partnership with our 30 years of experience to help in revitalizing this community, and specifically at this parcel of land to begin here at this vacated property, which is on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Way and South 11th Street, excuse me. This parcel represents an opportunity for us to create a attainable market rate housing local business space that respects and extends the legacy of the neighborhood. We've purchased this property and are working with current and former Hilltop residents and business owners to drive development of this space and how it will be operated, how it will function, what it will look like, who it will serve. We are aligning with this community in an ongoing way, and the hope that we'll help to slow the spread and mitigate the impacts of gentrification while increasing ownership options for those who have long defined this area as home. Moving into, so that kind of gives a very brief sort of overview of resilient community work that we do. Moving into the conservation side of the work that we do. We currently have over 50 active projects and have conserved over 250,000 acres of land, as I'd mentioned before, in just over 30 years. So conservation is obviously a cornerstone of the work that we do. We looked at quickly to acquire land for good, which means we are strategically looking for critical ecosystems and considering many ways that the land supports regional well-being, including the economic opportunity, affordable housing, city parks. Some of the work that we do has to move very quickly to ensure community and conservation assets aren't lost, but some efforts we work with take sometimes over a decade. It just depends on what type of work that we're doing. And to move into a little bit more of a macro version of some of that work, I've highlighted a very cool story here around Hairpin Ranch, which is a 274-acre working ranch that we partnered with the family that owns this ranch to conserve this ranch from overdevelopment. And this area, let's see, is owned by the Miner family, which has called this area home since the 1930s. As many working ranching families experience today, they have a lot of financial challenges and to maintain their land. And essentially, for them, it boiled down to two practical solutions. They could either sell portions of their land to developers to be able to maintain, or they could create working land conservation easement, which would allow them to keep their land and to continue ranching and basically make sure this land would never be developed forever. So the conservation easement is just a voluntary legal agreement that prevents the loss of this important land by permanently protecting it from real estate development. And our involvement in this, we've worked with the miners to create this working land conservation easement by securing almost $2 million in funding to purchase this on behalf of the miners. And so we've basically ensured that this land will forever be used as working land in this easement and create continue to conserve this thriving ecosystem that's vital to this community and to this family. As we look more towards restoration and stewardship, which is another cornerstone of the work that we do, we currently have 23 miles of active river restoration or riparian restoration, and we have to date planted 1.5 million trees and shrubs throughout the communities that we serve. So we restore forested public lands across the region and manage almost 17,000 acres of Forterra-owned land and easements. Our riparian restoration team actively works along 6 of our region's most important rivers, which you can see right here: Skykomish, Bear Creek, Sammamish, Thornton Creek, Cedar River, and Green Duwamish. These are the key areas that we focus on riparian restoration. And then also, along with our Evergreen carbon capture program, we've planted thousands of trees each year. And we also partner with Green City Partnerships programs, which activates volunteers to steward all of these neighborhood green spaces. So riparian restoration is a huge part of our work as well. And I do realize I'm going over these at a high level, so definitely ask questions at the end, or we can follow up with more information. But I kind of wanted to make sure I gave you the big picture of a lot of the work that we do, because we are involved in quite an eclectic array of different projects and initiatives that we do. But I mentioned Evergreen carbon capture, so just a little bit more about that. Let's see. Our carbon capture program basically helps companies, organizations, or individuals address the threats of global climate change by offsetting the carbon footprint and planting trees in our own Puget Sound region. So we help to calculate annual carbon footprints and then plant trees locally to balance carbon impact. Trees are planted as part of our comprehensive habitat restoration efforts, and the ECC plants native evergreen trees on Forterra stewarded lands and actively managed public and private lands, thanks to a lot of our field partners. So that's something that we are heavily involved in currently to help offset carbon footprint. And then moving into innovation, this is kind of the other major area of work that we're focusing on right now. Our conservation, restoration, and community work looks for innovative ways to do the most good that we can in those areas, looking at different ways we can create new tools, strategies to address our most pressing needs, whether it's policies or funding mechanisms or conservation tools. We look for different ways to apply existing strategies or co-ops or social impact funds to maximize benefits and also push equity. So I've highlighted cross-laminated timber because this is an area that we are heavily focused on right now as an innovative initiative. So what is CLT, or cross-laminated timber? So if you're not familiar, it's basically it's not a new initiative in terms of what it is. It's been used in European construction for decades, but we're looking to implement it here, and Forterra is focused on it because it's a lightweight, strong building material that's fire resistant, earthquake safe, well insulated, but it puts together different layers of lumber stacked in alternating perpendicular directions. And why it's important is that it has a potential to address diverse needs of the state's communities, workforce of residential housing for growing urban populations, employment in rural areas, and improved health in public forests through responsible sourcing. So it's basically a cost-effective and responsible and sustainable sourced material that leaves a much lighter environmental footprint than concrete or steel. It also provides other benefits, including quicker installation, reduced waste, improved thermal performance, design versatility. It's all meant to maximize local resources in a sustainable way that has the least amount of impact. So we are working with different stakeholders within the Washington State community to begin to implement cross-laminated timber as a viable resource moving forward. So in those areas, those are the key areas of work that we're doing right now. And those are kind of a very sort of under a magnifying glass, some specific areas of work that we're doing in those areas of innovation, conservation, resilient communities, restoration. I did want to kind of take this last piece before I wrap up. Just to tell you a little bit about why I work here and why I'm part of this organization. I'm a father of 4, so I'm busy. But being a father of 4 kids, a legacy is a huge part of what's important to me, and what kind of world my kids are going to inherit from me, and what kind of example am I to them, and what kind of people are they going to be? So I think first and foremost, it's about walking the walk, and it's not enough to just champion a cause with your voice for me, but I need to put that into action. And I chose to work here at Forterra, not just because of this mission of conservation, communities, especially through the lens of equity, which is hugely important to me, but also innovation across all areas of our work. Because of how inspirational and aspirational this work is. You know, the fact that our work is localized here, it definitely keeps the need and the progress right at the forefront for me. And the work that we do is very tangible and very palpable. And I can experience this work with my kids here, walking through areas that we work in terms of conservation or restoration, and talk with them about these communities and the need and what equity means, and getting them to understand the importance around all of this work is a huge part of why I do the work I do here at Forterra. I've been in nonprofit fundraising for 20 years now, and the work that Forterra does, being so focused in this area, I find it very inspiring, very motivating, and I love the work that I do for that reason. So I hope that you all got a good glimpse of who Forterra is, and I'm certainly open to questions or any additional feedback that you might have. And I thank you for letting me speak.
Alex, thank you so much. That was wonderful. That timber stuff makes me think about the class I had to take on timber in college. That was wonderful. Cross-laminated timber is definitely the new wave.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again. And if anyone has questions, maybe just put them in the chat so we can get to all of our speakers. So Daniel is next up. He is our Communication and Development Director at Spark Northwest. So Daniel, whenever you're ready.
All right, great, thanks. And I'm going to try and keep it to a tight 10 here. But can everybody see my screen? It says Spark Northwest, moving towards energy justice. Great. So Spark Northwest is a clean energy nonprofit that is focused on equity. And we serve communities across Oregon and Washington. I've been with Spark Northwest for 4 years. And it's an incredible organization that's been around for the last 20 years. And in fact, we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, which is really exciting for us. So what we do is we partner with communities to build equitable, affordable, clean energy. And the main focus for us is on equity, trying to make sure that everyone can access clean energy. And when I'm talking about clean energy, just so you know, I'm talking about wind, I'm talking about solar, I'm talking about energy efficiency, I'm talking about ductless heat pumps in your home. I'm even talking about electric vehicles or electric, sometimes it's like efficient LED lighting. Sometimes it's, you know, even like electric tractors if you own a farm. There's a whole range of things that we mean when we're talking about clean energy. And of course, the reason that we're focused on clean energy is because here in the Pacific Northwest, we've seen a lot of climate change impacts from this last summer when it was hitting record temperatures and forest fires, and losing communities in parts of Oregon and in parts of Washington. We're really feeling a lot of these effects of climate change. But there are certain groups that are feeling these effects worse than others. So this is a map from the Washington State Department of Health, which shows which communities and which areas have a higher risk of negative environmental health outcomes. And you can see that the red areas are the areas that tend to skew a little bit lower income and tend to skew more towards BIPOC communities, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. So even though we're all sort of feeling these impacts, there's definitely a disproportionate impact on people that we say are feeling the first and worst effects of climate change. So this clean energy transition is already underway. You've probably seen, I don't know, if you're on UW, you're probably like campus, you're probably seeing Teslas, you're probably seeing solar panels on people's roofs, you're probably seeing all kinds of different things, and you're thinking, this is great. You know, clean energy transition's happening. It's inevitable at this point. It's well underway, and it really is. But the problem is that, as with almost every big technological transition that we've ever seen in human history, there are certain groups that benefit and certain groups that get left behind. And unfortunately, the past model for how our energy system worked was not a terribly equitable model. In fact, you know, utilities are monopolies and they control, you know, basically all of the access to energy. And that does not lend itself to a situation in which, you know, the poorest and the least distant and the most disenfranchised among us actually have much of a say in their own energy future. So even while we're transitioning from, you know, fossil fuels to clean energy, what we really want to do is make sure that we're putting the needs of those communities first in that transition. And here's kind of a good example of this. I don't know how long you all have been in the state, but Washington State had a state solar incentive that you could get for putting solar onto your home for a very brief period of time. It was supposed to last like 5 years, and it got bought out in 2 years because it was so popular, which is great. The problem is that 80% of all those funds went to the upper half of households by income, while only 20% went to the lower half of households by income, which means that, you know, people with lower incomes were not able to, or did not feel like they could access the benefits of solar, which is a big shame because solar reduces your energy bill pretty dramatically. And so it's one of those things where the community that could probably benefit from it the most, you know, is unable to deploy that technology, while other communities, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but if you go to Mercer Island, there's a lot of solar panels out there. There's tons of them. And you could argue that those communities need those financial benefits a little bit less. So what we're trying to do is just make sure that we are trying to break down this green divide and make it more equitable so that everyone can access it. And here's a couple other images that I think are sort of helpful in illustrating this. Now, when we talk about the energy burden, we're talking about the percent of income that a household spends on its energy bills. And you can see that for Black households, for Hispanic households, for Native American households, the amount of money that they're spending as a proportion of their total income on energy is much, much higher. And that can be because of lower incomes, or it can be because of the cost of energy in the communities in which they're living. But either way, the energy burden is much, much higher for BIPOC communities. Now you might be thinking, okay, you know, this is great, but how exactly does clean energy help communities? Well, of course, it reduces carbon, which is a big one, helps, you know, prevent climate change, which is great. Energy costs less when you've been able to, say, put in ductless heat pumps into your home. You're going to be spending the least amount you could possibly spend on heating and cooling your home. It also creates jobs. There's a huge demand for clean energy, from ductless heat pumps to solar, you name it. It's a huge job creator at the moment. Citing those jobs in communities is really important. It also can make healthier homes. If you have ductless heat pumps in your home, your air quality inside your home is literally better air quality than if you have, say, a gas furnace like I unfortunately have. And they can build resilience, because if you are you know, able to distribute clean energy across the area in which you're living, as opposed to having it all come in, it doesn't mean that when one power line goes down, all your energy is lost. You can have a little bit of resilience, especially if the solar is sited on community centers or in churches or places like that. And finally, it promotes autonomy. It gives everyone the opportunity to create their own energy and sort of decide their own clean energy future. So we talk a lot about a just transition. And what that really means is just moving power and control of energy production into the hands of the community, which is really important to us, and moves it away from the more traditional model, which is, big utilities being able to control all of the energy production. Now, how does Spark Northwest create change? Well, what we do is we engage at the community level. We do coaching, technical support. We help with grant writing. And we do this to catalyze more clean energy projects, which hopefully inspire and share knowledge. Whenever we do a project, we inevitably hear about people who call us up and say, hey, I saw your project on X. I'd love to do something similar. And all of this builds power and wealth for marginalized communities through energy saving, asset ownership, and local job creation. So I'll just briefly share a few, I want to check on my time and make sure, 7 minutes in. Okay, so I've wanted to share a couple different examples. And this one is really interesting. This actually is in that same hilltop. Oh no, sorry, this one's in Portland. This is in Portland. And we partnered with Proud Ground Land Trust, which provides permanently affordable housing to income qualified persons. And this woman was able to get solar on her roof. And this whole project was able to get 10, 12 homes to all go solar, and they will all be permanently affordable housing that's going to have solar there now. And it serves as a model for future affordable housing projects. So this is the second time we've partnered with a land trust on something like this, and it's going really well. And we're hoping to replicate it more and more across the region. Now, here's the one I was just thinking of. This is a project we did at Shiloh Baptist Church, which is in the Hilltop community that Alex was just talking about. It's a historically Black community in Tacoma. It's historically a very underserved community in Tacoma. And, they think, I was talking to the pastor on Monday when we went down there to visit with them, and Pastor Christopher, who heads this church, was telling me that they think that they're the first church in Tacoma to be able to go solar, which is a big deal for them. But what's really exciting about this is, we got this great solar panels all up on the roof. It's going to reduce their energy costs, make it more of a hub. And they offer all kinds of services from, they're a homeless shelter to handing out turkeys at Thanksgiving and Christmas and presents at Christmas time. They're doing all this stuff. But what he told me was that he often sees that when the church does something, the congregation follows. So for example, he had installed ductless heat pumps, and then 20 of his congregants installed ductless heat pumps. So it's this really powerful kind of ripple effect that happens when projects like this are being done in these communities. We also partner with a lot of rural communities to do clean energy projects. Here's Cooperativa Tierra y Libertad, which is a farm worker-owned sustainable farm in North Washington. And we just really helped them, with their long-range energy planning and trying to figure out, what it was going to look like for them. We also partner with the Lummi tribe up there in Whatcom County, and a variety of tribes across the state to help with their energy planning. And in fact, we just put a installation on, or helped the Lummi tribe school put an installation up on their school, which was really exciting. A really exciting project. So these are kind of just a snapshot of some of the projects we do. But one of the other things that we do is we work in energy policy, which means trying to raise up the community voices to be heard in any kind of conversation that's happening around clean energy, and trying to avoid replicating some of the inequitable harms that we see or have seen in the past. And also we're trying to fund clean energy projects just to make those more accessible for everyone, and trying to make sure that the projects that are happening in low income and BIPOC communities are prioritized over other projects where maybe there is a little bit less need. So in our 20-year history, we have installed 13 megawatts of clean energy, and we produce 23 gigawatt hours annually, which is enough to power 2,555 homes. And annually, our partners save $1.5 million on their energy costs, which is really great, and it's something that we're very proud of. And if you're thinking, well, this all sounds great, this fast talking guy has really sold me on Spark Northwest, then you can help join the clean energy revolution. Like I said, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, and we're in the middle of 20 days of Spark Northwest in the month of October with a bunch of fun events and giveaways. So definitely follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or whatever. If you're interested in becoming a donor, we of course love to have new donors, and you'll get all the updates on exciting stuff. Annabelle will kill me if I don't say, please go through the Combined Fund Drive website so that you can get all the credit to her for organizing awesome events like this. And you can sign up to receive advocacy alerts or just become an ambassador in your workplace or in your community talking about these issues, because energy justice is something that honestly, it doesn't track for a lot of people. A lot of people don't follow it because if your energy, bill, it doesn't create that big of an impact on you, you might not think that it does for other people, but it really, really does. And so if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat and I'll pass it on to the next one.
Daniel, thank you so much. That was amazing. Those stories, oh my, I can't wait to read more on the website. That was really, really great. Thank you. Okay, Heather, you are up next. Heather is the Donor Engagement Manager for Washington's National Park Fund. So whenever you are ready.
All right, let's see. So I'm Heather, I'm with Washington's National Park Fund. We are the official philanthropic partner of Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. We have the privilege of supporting these 3 national parks here in Washington state. And our sole mission is to raise funds to help bridge those budget gaps in our national parks. We know that fostering relationships with future generations is what will keep these national parks preserved and lasting forever in the way that we see them now. The national parks are kind of living laboratories, which is one of the great ways that we use them and support science and research projects and volunteer projects that are able to kind of go year over year based on how the land is preserved. There really is a great area to be doing some of those studies and research. We are the official friends group of these 3 parks. So you might be familiar with friends groups of other national parks, but we are very unique in that we get to have all 3. So a brief history, we were founded in 1993 by former Governor and Senator Dan Evans and legendary mountaineer Lou Whitaker. And they saw the need to preserve our lands in Washington state for future generations, and seeing how land had been developed and these spaces were shrinking, they really started working toward how we can get those protected for future generations. We work really closely with the superintendents. Every year, all 3 superintendents submit a list of priority projects that wouldn't be funded without private support. Things like salaries of staff and general maintenance in the park is covered by the federal government budget, but there are a lot of kind of shortcomings there in terms of programs and kind of the extras that have to do with the experiences in the parks. So our primary 4 categories are advancing science and research. This is everything from shrinking glacier studies where we have scientists go out into the parks in different areas and measuring glacier depth and density and kind of what you're able to find at different levels throughout the time of different years. Visitor experience is everything from trail maintenance to signage, volunteerism and stewardship, and then youth and family programs. A lot of these kind of overlap depending on the year. And since we work with 3 very different national parks, our funding projects can really vary from year to year. We have the temperate rainforest, we have coastal lands, the heaviest glaciated peak in the lower 48 at Mount Rainier. So each year they submit what is important to them. And we work throughout the year between individual donors, corporate sponsorships, and grants to fund as many projects as we can and just work through that list. Something that is fun about our organization is 100% of the funds raised stay right here in Washington state. We've given $5.5 million to our parks in the last 10 years. And we fund about 30 to 40 projects a year, depending on the size of the project and the needs of the parks. Kind of a fun thing that we are the kind of main funder of Mount Rainier National Park's volunteer program, which the 2,000 volunteers provide about 70,000 volunteer hours each year. And so just the impact of that program really helps lift the load for the park staff. I'm going to play a short video, and in theory, the sound will work, so flag me if it doesn't. That kind of highlights one of our fun projects that we fund.
Hey everybody, in addition to hiking and skiing and climbing in the mountains, I also love giving back to them. That's why I'm a board member with Washington's National Park Fund. And I'm out here just south of North Cascades National Park today, checking out one of our coolest projects we fund, re-releasing fishers back into the Cascades.
This is one of those few species that's gone from this ecosystem because people took it out. It was wiped out for fur. The habitat's here, the food's here, everything's here except for the fishers. And luckily, we have a pretty robust population in the north, and our Canadian partners are willing to share some. So this is just a matter of putting them back where they belong. And in the bigger picture, it's increasing the biodiversity back to the native state. More biodiversity means more resilience, so when things like climate change come rolling in, and some species have trouble, the more species you have, the more likely your ecosystem is going to stay stable.
Oh, there's his face right there. See him?
From the beginning, we've had kids releasing these fishers.
There he is.
Because we kind of had this premise of the next generation releasing the next generation. And the idea is that, you know, kids don't forget this. You see an animal come out of the box and it's a strange animal you've never seen, and it makes an impression. But when a kid releases it, then they take some ownership in it. And so our hope is that as those kids grow up, that they become stewards of the land. They become stewards of what we've done here and perpetuate, you know, this action.
Oh, look at that!
This is a really complex project. We have to get animals from Canada, from Alberta, which is a very long way from here, right here into the North Cascades. And that requires a lot of people doing a lot of things, including paying trappers in rural Alberta to get fishers for us. And they make conservation efforts to do that and take good care of these animals. And they get them to the Calgary Zoo, who takes good care of these animals. And they get them on a plane to British Columbia, where we pick them up and bring them down. But as the Park Service, our funds are generally spent in the park. It's very hard for us to fund these things across the board, and you need all the moving parts to make it work. So when we look at the donations from the Washington National Park Fund, that's what helps us get these animals from Canada to here. That crosses the bridge between the partner efforts and the park efforts that makes it all happen.
If you want to learn more about this or any of our other projects, please head to WNPF.org and check it out there. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody.
So that's a fun project. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, fishers were actually completely extinct in Washington state, and they were a native species. And so over the years, we've helped fund the reintroduction of fishers to all 3 national parks. And now we're on, I believe, the 3rd season of kits being born here in Washington state from these introduced fishers. So, you know, projects like this that focus on the biodiversity and protecting the land as it originally was, and helping preserve that and bring it back to its original state. So science and research, like I said, things vary from year to year, but it is everything from the Cascade Butterfly Project, which studies trends through citizen scientists about the impacts of climate change on butterflies. You know, when they're hatching, the different patterns, what levels throughout the alpine wilderness they're found. Studying microplastics in remote alpine environments. And so going out there and collecting water samples and soil samples to find, you know, how high up in the mountains you're able to find different plastics. And then mammal monitoring from our friends, the fishers, to marmots and pikas. Visitor experiences, we help support things like the night sky programs up in Olympic National Park at Hurricane Ridge. Over the summer, you can go on, you know, Friday and Saturday nights, and they have the giant telescopes, and we'll just kind of talk about, since it is a dark sky area, you know, there's so little light pollution, you're able to see galaxies 13 million light years away. It is wild when they're throwing out these numbers and realizing what you're able to see up in that area. But also preventative search and rescue, especially in times like COVID, when people were trying to find ways to get outside and enjoy the environment. Some people were kind of stretching themselves beyond what they were used to. And so, providing rangers and signage to help guide people, to help avoid getting into search and rescue situations before. Volunteerism and stewardship, everything from trail work to meadow rovers, working in the native plant nursery. A lot of, especially in the Paradise area, is restoring where people have gone off trail to bring back those wildflowers. And so once again, kind of preserving the land as is and leaving as little impact as possible. And then youth and family programs, once again, we know that the younger generations will be the future stewards of our land. And so this past year, we did a food sustainability and native plant education. We've worked with tribal youth to create career pathways through internships, and then increasing accessibility to underserved youth. Something that is interesting as you look at different demographics is a lot of the people who live within 30 minutes or an hour of our national parks have never actually been inside the national parks. Whether it's entry fees or a vehicle that's able to handle the terrain. So helping support buses, different school programs that get kids into the parks. That is a very quick overview, but there are opportunities on our website for volunteering in our 3 national parks, but also for the fund itself. We are also always welcome to new donors and recurring donors. And then we do have virtual field trips online once a month. So in place of our in-person events, you're able to join us for ranger talks for about an hour on Wednesday afternoons at noon to talk about different projects and kind of get into the parks. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you so much for your time.
Heather, thank you so much. I love that idea of having the new generation release the new generation. That's so awesome. Thank you again. Okay, Mitch, last but not least, our speaker for Conservation Northwest. Mitch is the executive director. So whenever you are ready, please take it away.
Thanks, Annabelle. Hi, everybody. I founded Conservation Northwest 32 years ago. So I was at UW. I'm an alum from there. I graduated in 85 or 86 and used my natural science training there to try to keep the Northwest wild. Our role in the conservation movement is protecting, connecting the large wild areas. We're based in Seattle, but we work across most of Washington and southern British Columbia. On this graphic, everywhere that's in a color other than the background color, we got something going on. So I have staff in, let's see, King, Thurston, Lewis, Whatcom, Okanagan, Kittitas, Stevens, and Ferry counties that I can think of, plus in several areas of southern BC. Our core objective is to protect the large wild areas and the unusual and productive habitats like old growth forests and remaining natural sage steppe ecosystems, the places where biodiversity is most rich and wildlife find refuge. But there's a lot of groups that do those things. What we're most unique and add the most value in is connecting the wild areas together. This map is from science research that highlights how connections are essential. The gray are large wild areas where wildlife populations find refuge and can live in sustainable numbers. The black are computer generated models for habitat opportunities that link those large wild areas. So wildlife can migrate or individuals can move to reproduce between these ecosystems and compound the genetic diversity. We need these linkages, particularly as the climate changes and the landscape and our wildlife need to adapt. So some examples of how we go about this. When you drive over Snoqualmie Pass on I-90, about 10, 15 miles east of the pass, just west of Easton, is this signature wildlife overpass, the Price Noble Overpass. That extraordinary structure is there just for critters, and it's being used by elk and deer and many other wildlife. The reason that's there is that 20 years ago, from 2001 to 2005, we led a campaign that raised about $18 million, over 60 million public dollars, the rest private, and got 45,000 acres of industrial timberland switched to Forest Service ownership, providing for north-south habitat for wildlife across the I-90 landscape. And that motivated and inspired WSDOT and the Secretary of Transportation to try to make the highway passable for critters. So they built not only that overpass, but more than a dozen major underpasses, including this one at Gold Creek, just east of the ski area. And these are functioning, not just for elk and cougar and coyote, and even for, small mammals and amphibians, but also for Fisher that Heather was just talking about. A Fisher has been filmed going under this very underpass. So we kind of fixed a rift, a fracture zone over Snoqualmie Pass that was separating the Cascades into two separate ecosystems. Our work wove those two ecosystems, North and Central Cascades, back together. And we do this across the region. Another example is the Cascades to Rockies habitat corridor, a much longer corridor needed to link the core areas of the Cascades and the Rockies for species like lynx. This graphic here shows the core areas of the North Cascades in green on the left, and on the right, the core area of the Kettle Range. That's in Ferry County in Northeast Washington. It's kind of the westernmost stringer mountain range of the Rockies. And yellow is connectivity habitat suitable for lynx. So lynx can move back and forth and maintain a genetic connection between those two large ecosystems. Well, it's going to take a lot of work to keep that connection viable for lynx. So we're doing all sorts of things in that landscape. We've gotten the legislature to commit $18 million over coming years to build a half dozen structures like this, so wildlife can move under Highway 97. We actually, with our own money, 2 years ago, or last year actually, built a mile of fence on either side of a bridge that we cleared out underneath and vastly reduced the number of road-killed deer and other wildlife. We also have been protecting habitat on both sides of that highway for about a decade. And this culminates with a couple of weeks ago, we purchased for almost $5 million, almost 10,000 acres with the deed passing directly to the Colville Confederated Tribes. And on Friday, there's going to be a celebration, a ceremony hosted by the tribes on that property. But today, if you go to the Spokane Spokesman Review website, this awesome article details the whole thing. I'd encourage you to do that because it's an amazing and touching story about the family that sold us the property, about the tribes, and about the landscape connections that we're keeping open. But Heather's video about Fisher, we catalyzed that effort. We granted money to the State Fish and Wildlife Department back in 2001 to study the feasibility of reintroducing Fisher. And that led to the Park Service and us and the State Fish and Wildlife Department working together to get Fishers back in the Olympics, the South Cascades and the North Cascades. This is me releasing a Fisher named Mitch, of all things, on Mount Rainier about 5 years ago. But we've also been deeply involved in wolves. Wolves returned to the state after almost a century of absence. This was the first known reproduction of wolves in the state in that time. 2008, our volunteers took this remote camera photo of the lookout pack. And now, 13 years later, we've gone from one pack to more than 24. almost 200 wolves or more in the state. And the way we've been able to do that is by fostering coexistence. Wolves don't need a special habitat. They're resilient, they're adaptive, they have high reproduction rates, and as long as you're not shooting or poisoning or trapping them, wolves are going to do fine. So we focus on the people. For over a decade, we've worked with more than a half dozen ranchers that graze in large wild areas of our public lands and wolf territory, and also lobbied the legislature to fund hundreds of thousands of dollars to support what are now dozens of range riders, cowboys whose specific job is to keep the peace between wolves and livestock, promoting coexistence, so that you hear about the Holocaust of wolves in Idaho, where the legislature there passed a bill directing that 90% of the wolf population be killed. Similar things go on in Montana, Wyoming, Oregon's having its problems. Here in Washington, not a single wolf has been killed by the state this year, only one last year. And the reason is we've really doubled down on this type of coexistence work to promote social tolerance. It's very, very hard work. It will never be perfect, and it hurts when it goes wrong, but it's really making a difference. And, you know, climate change is changing the game out there for everything, not just affecting our forests, but also affecting our sage steppe ecosystems. Conservation Northwest has a program trying to maintain the north-south corridor that links up the Columbia Basin to arid grasslands in British Columbia. And fires are very disruptive to the habitat needs of pygmy rabbits and sharp-tailed grouse and many other species. So a lot of our work is to promote resilience of our ecosystems. This is what dry forests look like when they become overgrown from a century of cutting the big trees and leaving the little ones and putting out all the fires with Smokey Bear. We now have to remove the small trees and leave the big ones. So the upper two images are before images. The lower two are after. We thin and remove those little trees, and then we promote prescribed burning, fire, reintroducing fire to these landscapes. I have a team of 5 people who do nothing but watch over the Forest Service and collaborate with the timber industry to make every forestry project on several of our national forests in the state restorative instead of extractive. We do a similar thing on the west side where we're ripping out roads, improving culverts, thinning tree plantations, trying to help our forests be more resilient to the heavier storms that are causing landslides and blowouts that impact our fish populations. And lastly, just to leave you with something traditional, we're active in the big, large wild areas too, protecting places like the Kettle Range and the Selkirks and the Cascades. All these things, we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Mitch, thank you so much. Those were some gorgeous photos. Thank you, honestly, to everybody here. I'm a little biased. I graduated in environmental science in June. So this is like my favorite day. And I just really appreciate you all coming to speak and everyone for listening. We do have 5 minutes now if anybody has any questions. So anybody is welcome to unmute themselves if they want to ask questions.
I'm actually a little curious for the job creations. I'm just curious if those jobs have livable wages attached to them. If for Spark Northwest.
Daniel,
I thought you were talking about us, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, they have really livable wages attached with them. Solar installers make a very competitive salary, and some of the solar installation companies in our region in particular are really cool. And I would recommend checking out A&R Solar, which is a B Corp. We're not supposed to put our finger on the scale for anybody, for any one installer in particular, but they're a pretty cool, objectively, solar installation company. And all of the, HVAC companies that are doing ductless heat pumps and things like that, those are really great. Wind jobs are incredible. Those tend to be more utility scale, but those are very, very well paying jobs, especially if you got to go up the turbine, then it starts to pay a lot better. So they're very good jobs. And I'd also point out that it's one of the fastest growing jobs markets in the country. Well, the number of fossil fuel jobs is sharply declining. The number of clean energy jobs is on the rise.
Gotcha. Thank you. I was just curious about that.
We have a question in the chat. Can anyone comment on nonprofit work happening in Washington for green roofs? Maybe not. I know we have a lot you can see from the UW Tower, which is pretty cool, but I don't know anything about them.
You mean like plant life on roofs, like the kind of like rain garden on a roof sort of thing? Yes, okay. We're usually trying to get solar panels up there, so.
I try to keep the moss off mine so that my solar panels will be allowed to last.
I'll have to look into a nonprofit who does work with that, and so I can send something out later.
I just found a study the city of Seattle did on green roofs in Seattle of survey of vegetated roofs and rooftop gardens. I can post a link to that if you'd like. It has some interesting information in it, I think. And I do know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was one of the first and largest organizations, nonprofit-wise, to implement green roofs. So you might look into their website. They may have some information on how and who they worked with for that, just as a additional add on there. But I'll pop this into the chat just for reference.
Cool. Yeah. So I think it's so interesting how like everything's sort of interconnected, especially with the animals and how everyone's sort of working together. It's funny, we had a wolf haven last week, so we were hearing about the wolves as well. Yeah, I was just wondering, I know obviously you said a few of you have worked together, but I mean, are there more organizations all working together sort of to coordinate all the different aspects of reintroducing wildlife or conserving certain plant species that might be have been ripped out or something in certain areas?
Huge numbers of coalitions constantly evolving on all these issues. We've worked with Forterra after we were done with our work in the I-90 landscape, which Forterra was a big part of. We handed off to them to complete some more of it. Nature Conservancy followed up by buying a bunch of timber industry land further east. And that work I was describing in the crossing the Okanagan River Valley, part of the Cascades to Rockies corridor, involves a whole other coalition, the Working for Wildlife Coalition. Other groups involved in the Fisher effort are like Northwest Track and Woodland Park Zoo, along with the Park Service and Department of Fish and Wildlife and us. On any issue you put your finger on, there's local and regional and national groups involved. We tend to be pretty good, I think, in the conservation movement. There are way too many groups, but we do pretty well at playing together.
Awesome.
We involve a lot of different volunteers from groups too. I know that Conservation Northwest is the same thing, the Boys and Girls Clubs, local tribes, Washington Trails Association. I think we kind of started this whole thing with, we live in an area where everyone's really passionate about the outdoors, about conservation. And so there are so many like nonprofit groups, but also specifically volunteer groups to help support those efforts.
Nice.
Yeah, I was going to say too, the tribal work that we do at Forterra, I know crosses over in a lot of different other organizations, and we collaborate and try to work together in those regards as well. But Washington Trails Association, we do work with, of course, that Heather mentioned too. So there's a lot of enmeshing that happens in the work that we do.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Thank you. And thank you for being here. It was really great.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think it is just that time. So I have a recording of this if anybody is interested. They want to pass it along. And thank you again. And please email me if you would like anybody's PowerPoint or questions or connections, whatever. All right, everyone. Have a great Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Take care, everybody. I think you gotta end the thingy. Could you leave meeting for all or end meeting for all?